Leadership is something that you are given or earn or take, and it's a responsibility. Ultimately, it's anchored in a responsibility to develop, move, and make things happen. For me, I look at people who have leadership positions at the moment within football, develop the game positively, be that financially, be that the long-term interests of the game.
On today's episode of Everyday Leadership, I have the pleasure of talking to someone who is genuine and authentic in the way he approaches work. He is probably one of the well-respected voices and connected people, shall I say, in the sports industry. Entrepreneur, filmmaker, consultant, someone who has not only dedicated his life to like bringing incredible stories to light in the world of sport, but a passion around racism in sport and changing that, doing a lot of work behind the scenes and changing that narrative. Is someone that I just been waiting to actually have a conversation with, and he's got multiple businesses that he's created and founded, which we're going to definitely lean into a lot more, such as the the Football Blacklist is one of the ones that he does. His organization, Refresh Sports Consultancy, worked with some amazing people like Yaya Toure, Liv Cook, Yannick Bolassi, and you'll have seen his films, like from Refresh Films as well. So he's a man of many talents. He's also a very humble man. So I've been interested to learn, like, how did my guest, Leon Mann, get to where he is and start to do what he does. So welcome, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with me today.
Hey, my man. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction and invite on. Looking forward to sharing some thoughts with you.
I know you're right into sports. That's your thing. I'm curious. Did you have aspirations as a youngster to play sports?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was that 11-year-old who would always have a ball in my hand, always be playing. At secondary school, I was, for a time, the captain of the football team. I was playing in the basketball team, running 200 meters track. I'd try every single sport going. I'd be the cricket captain. I was obsessed with sport. I loved it. It was a connector. I happened to be quite good at some sports, and I would try every sport. So I absolutely had aspirations to try and go as far as I could. At the same time, I had, parents who were very grounded, both teachers who were telling me, look, this sport thing, we want you to try as much as you can, but just understand that it's really difficult to push on in that space. So education has to be your primary concern. We want you to be very focused on your learning and pushing forward in that space. Something which I feel I managed to do as best as possible. And yeah, it was a real positive childhood in that respect. And yeah, sport was and is, a big part of my life. In terms of where I kind of got to as an athlete, shall we say, and I use that word with caution, not to offend athlete listening to this, who might see me jogging around my local park in Walthamstow thinking this guy cannot refer to himself as an athlete at all. I, played in university football, and enjoyed playing cricket, but never really got to a level where I could kind of talk of in any glowing terms. But really enjoyed my relationship with sport, and I think sometimes people assess their relationships with sport in terms of how far you got along that pyramid. Did you play at the highest level? Did you play semi-professional? Actually, I kind of have a different view in terms of what did sport give me in my life, and how did it help me navigate this incredibly challenging world that we live in. It taught me about teamwork. It taught me about leadership. It brought me together with people that maybe I wouldn't have normally come together with. It built friendship groups. It gave me a relationship with my friends and family that's much closer than it would have been otherwise, I believe. So sport has given me so much, and I'm delighted and feel very blessed to be leading the life that I am as a result of my relationship with it.
Wow, it's very unusual to hear it framed that way. Hear the benefits that I got from the sports, hear the things that sport gave me, hear the things that it helped me to grow and develop as a person, which then flowed into my personal and professional life. How did you adapt that way of thinking, that philosophy? Was that from when you were at uni and you decided to step into like journalism, or has that been something that you've evolved with over the years recently?
Oh, it's absolutely evolved, and something that has probably that I've realised in recent years, in many respects, because I don't think I've necessarily, had the maturity and the foresight and be able to step back and look at things with a wide lens to understand what sport has given me. I think there have been times in my life where, I've had different relationships with sport. Certainly as a young person, I've enjoyed it. But I've been trying to push on to play as well as I can. I wanted to be the best player in the team. And when I was the best player in the team, I wanted to play for a better team, to challenge myself, and to try and push forward in that respect. But actually, when I look back and I look at the journey that I've had with sport and the relationship I have with it now, I still play down in Brixton on a Wednesday night in a six-a-side league, and I take it very seriously, maybe too seriously. Actually, that's about my wellness. It's about not having a phone in my hand and constantly looking at WhatsApp and emails and LinkedIn. That's the one time in my week where I actually genuinely switch off, and I get space. And these are things I'm trying to get better at as a leader. I'm always immersed in my work, and when your work overlaps with your hobby, it can be a dangerous space. Um, find yourself constantly feeling like you're working all the time, and that isn't good for your mental health. I don't think it gives you space to be fresh in terms of how you approach meetings and emails and everything. So you have to be careful, I think, or certainly I do in this space. So I certainly didn't realise it when I was younger, and coming up through your 20s, there's a crazy energy and enthusiasm. But in my case, I didn't really have the foresight. It's only when I got to late 20s, early 30s that I think I started reflecting on sport and my relationship with it in a different way. And yeah, that's kind of helped me at the time of life I am at the moment with two young children. Their relationship with sport is starting, and maybe their relationship with sport is very different to mine. So I also have to take a step back and check myself constantly on that journey. As I'm finding on a Sunday morning when I'm telling my daughter to step up for offsides, when she's playing at the back, when maybe I should just be saying it for myself, and it doesn't matter if you're playing somebody offside.
No, man, it's one of the hardest ones. I'm not gonna lie. When my son was playing football, early days, I used to be like, "Come on, best," and I remember I was like, "Wow, this is not helpful." I literally had to go and step way back from the line. I'm like, I'm not gonna say a word. I'm just gonna observe. And after the game, I'll ask how it was, and we have that conversation. It is hard to do because you want to be like, "What are you doing? Like, change this, move that, get this positioning." But at the same time, you also want him to enjoy the game.
That's it, and I'm so bad at it. I'm so bad at it, and I actually had a conversation with the England women's manager about this because I ended up. I mean, it's incredible where you end up sometimes in life. So I was a guest of the FA chief executive for the England versus Ivory Coast men game, and I was actually sat between the England chief executive and the England women's manager, who obviously went on to win the Euros final. And I was talking to her. I'm sure she was very bored of this conversation, by the way. I was talking to her about my relationship as a father on the sideline with girls' football. And I said to her, that, have you got any advice for me? Because I'm watching the game and I really want my daughter to do technical things in the game and understand the game in a certain way that maybe my parents weren't as vocal about or didn't give me the guidance in, that I felt I would have been maybe a better player earlier if I'd have known. So, for example, when I'm talking my daughter through a game, she plays better. However, that is not the right thing to do. I just need to step back and just enjoy it for what it is. And I said, often I shout instructions onto the pitch. And of course, I shouldn't be, because that confuses things with her coach, who's
Yep.
wonderful, excellent at what she's doing, you know. So she can do those things and does do those things, but I just can't help myself. And do you know what she said? Sabrina turned around and she went, "Do you know what, Leon? Just let her play. Just let her play. They shouldn't worry about positions. She's 10 years old, just let her play." And I was just found it really difficult to hear that. But actually, this is coming from the woman who is at the very top of football for women, not just in this country, but Europe. She's won the Euros twice. So, yeah, working on myself. That's the theme of that relationship with sport that I have right now.
I think that's also the beauty of parenting, where it forces you to it introduces yourself to yourself in a way. The parts where you didn't know was there or lay dormant for years, your kids kind of bring it out to you as you start to go through different experiences with them, and it forces you to have that reflection piece of, okay, what am I going to do about this? Am I going to change, or am I going to just carry on in the way that I might have been brought up, in the way that I might have learned from my parents? And that's that key piece to growth that we face as parents.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel incredibly blessed and grateful that my parents, showed care and love in the way that they did, and but I guess I'm kind of looking at the gaps, things I wished for, what's not, and trying to fill them in my way. But actually, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about others. It's about my children. It's about that relationship, and yeah, like I say, I think self-reflection is a great thing, and self-awareness. It's not always as easy as it says in the
At all.
self-help books or in the Twitter memes or whatever it might be. But we're all working on ourselves, or at least I hope we are.
We are indeed. How did you get into journalism from the love of sport and doing all the way throughout university to journalism and going to work for like BBC and ITV? How did you get into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really unconventional journey. As a young man, I had aspirations, of course, to try and become a professional footballer. In my mind, I just thought I was a really good player, particularly when I was very, very young. Um, so I thought, yeah, I'd love to be a footballer. I've got a bit here. There's something that I think I can build on. But ultimately, I wasn't good enough. And sometimes as a young person, it's hard to kind of come to terms with that. But interestingly, I don't know what it is within me, but I kind of didn't find it as hard in the same way. I just kind of felt because I was doing well in education that actually I had other options, and I was kind of fine with that. Kind of I wanted the dream, but I had other things that I could potentially pursue. So I'm grateful to my parents for instilling that in me, in terms of making me feel that I could do other things. Um, However, the thing that I really, really wanted to do, if I couldn't be a footballer, was to be involved in it in some way. And I thought that could potentially be as a journalist or presenter, but I didn't see any black people to to follow or to connect with. So I felt like I could do something interesting, but I'm not quite sure I'll be able to kind of push on in that career. And also, what are the pathways? How do you become a sports journalist? How do you become a sports presenter? There was no information, there was no connector, and the big thing for me was I just didn't see anyone who I connected with doing that job. The black people that I did see, who I think are fantastic, people like Garth Crooks, but Garth Crooks have played hundreds of football games at the highest level. And it's incredible that he could have a transition into becoming a top athlete, into a top broadcaster. But I thought, well, if I'm not going to be a top athlete, then it doesn't quite connect. So anyway, I kind of like parked this aspiration, and I picked it up again once I'd been working for the Kick Racism Out of Football campaign, which I joined when I left university. And I made contacts with people like the sports journalist Darren Lewis, sports journalist Rodney Hines of The Voice, and I was like, well, these guys didn't play football professionally, and they're in the industry, so actually maybe there is an opportunity. And I had some links, and then I got invited to the BBC to apply for a job, and the rest kind of took care of itself. And once I was in, it was Christmas and birthday wrapped into one. I just couldn't believe my luck. I was in the BBC, this big broadcast, Match of the Day, Football Focus, athletics coverage. It was a dream. It's not often you can say I bounce out of bed, bounce into work, bounce home, and can't wait to go in tomorrow. And that actually was my reality. It was my reality working at the Kick It Out campaign as an anti-racism campaigner in football, and it was my reality as a journalist or an aspiring journalist. Because it was an entry job that I first got in. So I felt really blessed. And once I was in, they wouldn't let me broadcast, clearly, because I wasn't experienced enough. They wouldn't let me write for the website because I hadn't had a great deal of experience doing it. So I started writing for the Voice newspaper, thanks to Rodney Hines. And because I had some good links with people like Rio Ferdinand, Michael Richards, etc., I was able to do some really cool pieces that my contemporaries, the people I was working with, who were at a much higher level than me, didn't have that access. So my community, because it was mainly through my community, I was connecting with black athletes, enabled me to have access to high-profile athletes at a time when really in my career I shouldn't have. So because of that, that propelled me in my career. It really pushed me ahead of the queue because I was able to get to things that other journalists weren't. And I really kind of had a period of sustained success that really helped me in my career. And yeah, that's kind of where things kind of really began to take off.
How do you build those kind of networks and develop those kind of relationships? Because it can't, I'm sure it must have felt daunting sometimes. I mean, reaching out, having those kind of conversations, especially in a field in the area, like I said, there was lack of representation already. But you managed to, one, find the black people who worked in those fields, but not just find them, but build relationships where they gave you opportunities, and then you built on that with the likes of Rio Ferdinand that you just mentioned. How did you do that? Because that's a skill.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think everything about my identity at that time, and also, this landscape of underrepresentation kind of worked massively in my favor. I believe I was in the right place at the right time, and I had enough emotional intelligence and self-awareness to do things and be myself in a way that was, I don't know, I don't want to say attractive to others, but was just kind of like a space of their normality within a space of a lack of diversity and a lack of relatable figures. So, for example, when I would be at a sport event in a media area, if Rodney Hines and Darren Lewis weren't there, I would be the only black person for sure. But yet, we'd be covering a sport where a number of the athletes, like the majority at times, would be black. So therefore, they're walking through a mix zone, and there I am with a microphone or a dictaphone, and they're like, "Who the hell is this guy? Who's this?" Equally, the very few kind of black agents, etc. I was part of that community, so I had a connection with them, and I kind of feel that they were willing to help me and to connect with me because they kind of felt a sense of community, and that I believe kind of helped to my advantage. And I think they saw that their clients would connect with me in a different way. It's the way that would potentially connect with others, and the things I was interested in, would connect with the athletes and did connect with the athletes. And I would be, this is late 20s, early 30s. I'd be in nightclubs and I'd see them, and I wouldn't ask them about what are they doing at work, what's going on with football. I'd just talk about music maybe, or whatever it would be within that space, because I played, I say I played it the right way. It didn't feel like I was being strategic. It just felt like I was just kind of being a normal guy saying, this is not a workspace, so just calm down. And I think people, particularly younger people, can misread things in that time, and they can develop a relationship that doesn't work in the right way. So I kind of feel that my community, the people around me, the good habits that they had rubbed off on me, and I was able to kind of build relationships that others weren't. The key word is relationships, and I believed I was a relatable figure in a world of white men who were older in grey suits who only wanted to speak to these guys about how they played a football match or the controversial thing that had happened in their game or career.
I think for me it sounds very much you saw the human, other people saw the football player, and that's kind of where you get that. And I talked about the stuff around the authenticity, but it's what makes a difference. You don't want just to be spoken to for the thing that you're known for, because we're so multifaceted, and you've been able to react and reach out to the human person. You're naturally going to stand out anyway, as well as the fact that you're black and all of them, so many different things like that. But that is very, very different.
Spot on. And to me, I'd be in situations where I'd be with a media pack or a media group, and the sports person would walk into a room, and everyone would run and swamp around them. And actually, I was in a privileged position where I was mainly doing feature reporting, so I could kind of hold back because I wasn't there for a
Mm.
news line, for one line to sell a product or to lead a story. And so I'd hold back, and I'd normally kind of just start talking to the entourage of the said athlete. And that can be cousin, brother, best friend, whoever it would be. And we just talk about life and stuff, and we connect. And actually, by forming those bonds with the people around the athlete, I guess they would go and say that guy was actually all right, and it wasn't again this strategic kind of cold way of trying to find a way into an athlete. It was just seeing people as human beings, um, and I think that helped me massively at the time as well, because there's a lot of nervousness around journalists, and even when I do interviews occasionally, I kind of like go away and worry a little bit about how I'm going to be represented. Like, is half the quote going to be cut up so I'm actually not given the full context of what I'm trying to say, and it's projected in a way that actually doesn't project me to the world in the way that I would like to be, and I believe is a true reflection of myself. So when people go into those situations to get something um, from them that's kind of anchored in truth and honesty and realness, there's got to be a trust, and to form that trust in that environment is really difficult. So, this is about people. We're all people, and I think the principles of where I've had success, can be applied right through whatever business you're involved in. Because I know certainly from my perspective, if I connect with somebody and I trust somebody and I value somebody, I often look for a reason to work with them, and I believe that I've certainly benefited from that over the years in the sports industry. I believe that people have come to me um, because they feel like there's a connection there, and I'm really grateful to those people for that.
That's a really good lesson. I love how you said it. It's something that applies in so many different areas of life, and that's which is so true. And you're finally in the career that you wanted. You're starting to live that dream and make inroads. And at the same time, you decided to start something which at that point in time was major, which is the football blacklist. What was the your driver at that point in time, and did you think it would be what it has become when you started it?
Yeah, no, do you know what? It's interesting because I mean, look, there was no kind of big strategy behind um, the football blacklist when we started it. Essentially, it was Rodney Hines from the Voice newspaper and myself. I'd gone to him and said, "Look, I've got an idea. Got an idea that's kind of based around the concept of the Times Rich List, where we kind of read who these incredibly powerful and rich people are. Everyone kind of enjoys it. I say everyone, I enjoy it. Lots of people enjoy. Oh my god, this person's doing this. This person's doing that. And it's a point of discussion. But I'm like, well, where is this for the black community? Obviously, I know that the power list exists now, but this is around about the time when that was just beginning to start as well. And I just thought, well, I'm in the football industry, and I see the very few black people that there are. But when I go to see my friends in the community, when I go and speak to young people, they have no idea who these people are. And actually, is there something in shining a light on these people as a vehicle to show the next generation a pathway that I, touched on that I didn't have for the sports media when I was younger. So we make that pathway visible to make these things more achievable to help to address underrepresentation in the football industry. And for context, at the moment, 42% of the Premier League, so 42% of players in the Premier League are from black communities. So that's 42%. We have one black board member across 20 club boards. That's Deji Davis, who works at JP Morgan, very successful, and a very good friend of mine. We played football when we were younger, grew up in North London together, and he's the one black board member at Brentford Football Club across the Premier League. Which is incredible when you look at that 42%. 42% of the assets that drive money in football are black, yet we only have one black board member, right? We've got one black owner of a club at Burton Albion, Ben Robinson, lovely, lovely man. Took that club from, I don't know, the ninth tier of English football all the way up to the Championship at one point. They're kind of in League One at the moment. He took over that club in 1987, I believe. I might be a couple of years out there, so forgive me if you're listening, Ben. But one black owner across all 92 professional football clubs in this country. So that disparity, we have to have a way of addressing that. We have to have a way of talking about that. And also at the same time, we have to have a way of stimulating and educating and showing our black communities how to get into the game. And for me, the football blacklist, just as a simple list, could help to start a conversation around that. Football really embraced the football blacklist because it was a positive thing. It's a celebratory thing. So we're talking about the few black people that work within the clubs and the industry. So it was embraced by the industry. And we've done some great things. The Premier League have been a long-term sponsor of the celebration event that we do, bringing hundreds of black people in the football industry together, which is great. The FA were very, very involved at the beginning of the football blacklist and are now, again, very involved in it. We're having international conversations about what we could do with other sports leagues, which is really exciting. And, it's all about addressing this lack of representation and collaborating with the sports bodies, in this case football, to be able to build things out. So did I think I would be having conversations with the biggest sports leagues in the world when we put together this list in the Voice newspaper? No, I did not. Did I hope we would? Absolutely. I didn't believe it. And now it's a reality that, there's so much potential for it. And the great thing is this is all about positivity, but in the middle of a real mess of underrepresentation. So it's a positive vehicle to help in some way to activate conversations and address this big, complex problem that we need to address, so we don't feel uncomfortable in these industries.
We've also been very intentional of not just showcasing footballers who are out front. You've intentionally showcased people behind the scenes. Why did you think that was super important to do?
Oh, I mean, it was super important to showcase those people who weren't the footballers or weren't the people in front of camera, if you like, in the football media, because that makes up a very small percentage of where the opportunities actually lie for many people in the community. So if you want to be a lawyer in football, you need to see some black lawyers, I believe, if you're in the black community. You don't need to, but I think it's very helpful to see them. If you want to be an agent, it's helpful to see black agents. And also those people aren't getting kind of recognition within the wider kind of football community, in my view. Some are, but many aren't. So we need to say thank you to those people for the excellence that they have in their industry. And we also need to make sure that the black woman from Walthamstow, let's say, because that's where I'm kind of based, can look at the blacklist and see a black female who's smashing it as a lawyer and go, do you know what? I love football. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a lawyer in football because I love football. That is really, really important. And previously, my experience growing up in the 90s, I love football. I saw lots of black athletes. Outside of that, I saw black athletes on television with microphones in their hands. You know, that just wasn't something I could connect with. Um, I could connect with, oh, right, okay, I could become a footballer. But once that dream's dead at 15, 14, 16, 21, 25, where does that leave me? My relationship with football is that I can only go as a fan on a match day. And, that's not right. That's not right. I want somebody to be trying to become a doctor who's a crazy Liverpool fan. And I want them to go, do you know what? My dream is actually to be the doctor for Liverpool Football Club. And that is where I'm going to push to make sure I get to that place because I love football. I love Liverpool Football Club. I love the fact that I'm a doctor, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look after those players. That should be a reality where people can see a pathway and people can feel like they're welcome. Importantly, feel like this is an industry that's going to welcome me and embrace me. For me, that helps to address underrepresentation, increase excellence in the football industry, importantly, and have a more positive kind of like space, full stop, for us all.
It's it's quite enriching to actually hear this perspective. I mean, we talk a lot around representation. We talk a lot around the fact that there's so much to do in the industry outside of the actual sport that's being played. Because, like you said, there's lawyers, there's the doctors, there's even people who are like yourselves who are actually bridging the contracts and bringing people together. There's scouts. There's so much more that you can still nurture your love and do that people don't necessarily think about. And the reason they don't think about it is because they don't hear enough about it, despite the sound bites you can hear. So you're like Football Black is probably the first space that I've seen that really, really highlighted where it's like, actually, here's a list of people who you would never have heard of, but you can probably get to know and read their story and follow their journey. You can be like, it actually does exist. And the next level, I guess you took that to, which I actually found quite interesting, is you started something new, Football Blacklist, that's going. A year later, you started BCOM, the Black Collective of Media and Sports. I'm like, do you ever just slow down for a minute and enjoy or even nurture what you're doing and you start something else? Like, why so quickly?
Do you know what it was? It was I'd left the Kick It Out campaign, and I loved working with Kick It Out. They were brilliant. A job out of university, you're working in football and you're working to challenge racism and discrimination. So it's kind of purposeful. It's the area you're passionate about. That's real wholesome work. I felt so lucky to be at that campaign. And then I stepped out of that campaign, but the campaigner never leaves you. You don't suddenly say, right, I'm a journalist now, so boom, that's it, done, parked. That was a great piece of my life. Some people might do that, but for me, it was never an option. So I had this burning thing in me where I was like, well, now I'm away from the campaign. I can actually decide what I campaign on as an individual. So that felt really empowering. And I was like, do you know what? I'm not an LGBT activist. It's not my space. I support those activists. I support what they're campaigning for, but I'm not an expert there. So that's not the area I'm going to campaign in. I'm not a campaigner on the British Asian community, but the Black community, that's the community that I'm anchored in and rooted in and part of. So I'm going to look at areas in this space that I'm passionate about, and I'm going to do something. I'm not going to go and talk about it. I'm going to do something. That was my driver. So the Football Blacklist, that was a big thing for me, and I didn't realise it was going to come as big as it is now. No chance. I thought, look, as a journalist, I'll write a list every year. That's calm, right? That's all good. But with the Black Collective of Media and Sport, I walked into the BBC, and as welcoming as my colleagues were, and it was brilliant to be there, the fact that it's called White City, it's almost like, right, they name it this for a reason. For a reason. Off the tube now. I've just got off the tube where I'm seeing a whole heap of black people, Asian people. It's diverse, and I'm walking into White City, and it's like I'm like, my father's from Worcestershire. It's like I've walked into Worcestershire here. Like I'm sort of like trying to say hello to the black person on the other side of the room because I'm just excited to see someone else who's from my community. And the few black people that were in the building, there was a bit of a whispering culture in the corridors, kind of like, what are you saying? You're good? Yeah, I'm good. that's not very diverse here. No, that's not. And then a white colleague would come, yeah, yeah, how you doing? Yeah, okay. So this whispering culture, I really struggled with as a campaigner because it was kind of like, I get it, and I hated it because it was like, why do we have this whispering culture? This, clearly people are scared of what it means to have a conversation out loud around diversity, around the fact that, maybe some people clearly have a bit of a emotion, shall we say, towards Serena Williams, and might talk about Serena Williams on the shop floor in a way that we have a problem with. Why is it Serena's a problematic person? We don't see her as that. We see her as a complete kind of leader who we love. And why is there a discussion about um, I mean, it was crazy. Why is there a discussion about, oh, yeah, but it's not fair because look at the way she's built? I'm like, well, hang on, where are we going with this? So we kind of like going to talk about how certain white people are kind of like physically stronger or different or whatever it is. We don't do that, do we? We just talk about their excellence. So why has it become a conversation about physicality in this space and not about skill and ability? So the fact that we were having these kind of discussions as a whispering culture, as I would describe it, just wasn't good enough for me. So I went and knocked on some doors of senior people and said, we've got the London 2012 games coming up. How are we going to be reflected on screen in terms of diversity? How are we going to be reflecting the diversity of the country and of London in particular within our editorial decisions and what we're doing and how we sound and how we feel and what covers we store, what stories we cover? And I, instead of just saying, this is the problem, we'll walk out the room, I said, this is the problem, and I want to be part of the solution. And I'm going to come up with some solutions, and I'd love to work with you on it. And actually, there were leaders who were open and receptive to that. And then the next stage was just bringing together these incredible people who were within the building and within the industry, because it wasn't a BBC problem, it was an industry problem. And I was the person who just called the meetings. That's kind of how I became the leader. I was just like, right, we're meeting here at this time. I'm going to do an introduction. I'm going to get a senior person from the industry to come and speak to us. And then we kind of started building it out. I mean, BCOMS is many, many people. I get the credit because I called the meetings ultimately, and I wrote the emails, and I went and did the meetings, and all of those things. But it was a real collective of people. And, at first it's kind of very, very difficult because you're building something. But I kind of rode the waves, we all did, as black sports journalists, of that frustration of having absolutely no resource, lots of ideas, nobody having time to really kind of get things done because we're looking after our families and trying to progress in our careers. But we got things done somehow. And I guess I was one of the leaders within that, and have led BCOMS to a place now alongside other incredible people like Drew Christie, Jeanette Quatchy's been very involved, Hugh Wozencroft, these brilliant, brilliant people, to get it to a place now where it's kind of industry recognised, helping lots and lots of young people, as well as kind of consulting with the industry to help them be as good as they can be and eventually be good in this space to be able to drive their work forward in a different way.
It's something you said in there where it's like there's a problem, but I also want to be part of the solution, and here's what I'm going to do something. I think a lot of times it's quite easy to be like, there's a problem, I need someone else to do something about it, and you kind of step away. But like you said, that activist part of you is still alive and burning, and you're like, nope, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna lean into this. I'm gonna make a difference. I'm gonna see what can happen. And what's been built with that is, again, another remarkable organization, which has been really, really inspiring.
Thank you, and look, it all comes from a sense of, look, why is no one doing this? Like, there's a frustration.
Mm.
If someone's doing it, I'm the first to go, they're doing it, support what they're doing. Like, if they want the support, like, support what someone else is doing. Don't try and build something else if somebody else is kind of doing it. But there was a space that was completely empty and open, and I just thought, it feels like a good idea, and it feels like we should be doing something here. okay, if it's down to me to write the emails and do the meetings and whatever, I can do that. And I was fortunate that in that time in my life, I didn't have children at that point, and everyone else, I say everyone else, God, that would sound bad. And lots of people were watching box sets. We don't talk about box sets no more because we've got all these kind of
Streaming
streaming
platforms.
right?
Yeah.
But I can't tell you one box set I ever watched. And when people would say box sets, I was like, what? What box set? People watching box sets, I was building stuff. Um, I wasn't that guy in his 20s who would be sat watching box sets. And maybe I should have been. Maybe I'd be a bit more relaxed and not be have as many grey hairs on my head. But I would spend the time people were watching box sets in the evening, sat in front of my computer writing up like strategies, writing emails to people, trying to do things. And look, that's not criticism of anyone who's watching box sets, by the way. It's just I had a different way of using my time. I was using my time to try and shift things on, and I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. Like, I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for me or go, "Wow, isn't he a great guy?" I enjoyed it. I super, super enjoyed myself building something, building something within my community, connecting with people, problem solving. Like for me, it was such a privilege to be able to do that. And now to be at a point where these things are internationally recognized and there are people being paid a wage to be consultants for different elements of the football blacklist and BCOMS is like that's something I can one day walk away from all of this and just be kind of content that I did something, that I contributed to something positive.
You talked about the privilege. You talked about the enjoyment. I want to hear the difficulty and the frustration with building two massive things like that. And what was that? What was that like?
No, I mean, look, I have to give credit to my wife, really, my girlfriend at the time, at the beginning of all of this, um, who who actually developed a very successful campaign, initiative, movement, whatever you want to call it, called Women in Football. So she founded Women in Football, which is very big right now. At the same time that I was developing BCOMS and Football Blacklist. And it was really interesting looking at the parallels in terms of the experiences there. Because while she was building Women in Football, you could see the sponsorship, the community, everything growing around it. And I had a frustration saying, well, the things that I've got called Blacklist and Football and Blacklist and Media and Sport were not getting the same love and appreciation from the mainstream. They were from the community, don't get me wrong, but from the mainstream, the feedback confidentially I was getting from many corporates at the time was, do you think you could just call it diversity something? Because if you call it black, then that means we might have the British Asian community, we might have the Jewish community, we might have so many different people coming knocking on our doors, and we kind of just want to keep it simple. And I was just like, well, no, frankly, these are black-led things. They are proudly black-led, and they are focused on the black community. At that time, I mean, Football Blacklist, still black community, black-led to media and sport, black-led organisation, although we work on wider diversity now, but it's black-led. It's from a black lens, black perspective, and why can't a black-led organisation work on improving the diversity of all underrepresented groups? I don't see why that can't happen, and I'm glad that the industry respects us and works with us on lots of different areas of diversity. But there were huge frustrations. I just. But do you know what? The one thing that helped me get beyond the frustrations about the lack of resource, the millions of coffees I'd be giving, free consultations to massive businesses where they turn around and say, we haven't got any money to contribute to this, etc., etc. The one thing that kept me going is this thought of, do you know what? If you don't give me no money, I'm still going to do it because I'm me. So I control my time. I control what I'm doing. So it's not going to be reliant on what you're doing. And it's funny because I speak to strategists and people who go, right, Leon, you shouldn't be doing all these things. You should be concentrating on one or two things. And I'm like, look, totally understand. And I understand that's how it should work in the real world. But for me, like, I've got to keep these things going. And I've got to do these things. Otherwise, they disappear. And I really believe in the opportunity. And I think at some stage I'll be able to step away from things and not have to do everything, because they'll grow to the point where other people want to get involved, and that's how it's played out. But um, I'm in control was my feeling like coming up. I was just like, do you know what? Big bank, big commercial entity. If you're saying you don't want to give me the money, I'm still going to get 50 people together next week to come together with senior leaders to talk about what we can do. I'm still going to spend time on the phone to young Black and Asian men and women about how we can help to put them together with people within our community to help their progression. I'm still going to ask difficult questions if we get opportunities to kind of put some pressure on so that this diversity doesn't fall off the map. I'm still going to go and speak to politicians about what they should be doing to help us as a Black community in this particular area. You can't control that. That's for me to control. So that's the one thing that kept me going through the difficult times. It was this sense of, you don't control this, I control this. And our community controls this. And then, of course, when we got to the Black Lives Matter moment, my phone's blowing up. In fact, to be fair, before that, Raheem Sterling, his Instagram posts about the treatment of Black
Yeah,
young
it's
players in
powerful.
the media had my phone blowing up. And that was 2018, 2017,
Hmm.
2018. So that began the interest in BCOMS, the real interest in BCOMS, in my view. We were doing other things, and I was self-funding it because of my success in my consultancy work. I was just saying, I don't need your money. I'm going to use my money, and I'm going to put it into BCOMS, and I'm going to put it into the blacklist because I can control it now. I'm having commercial success here, so I'm going to make these things grow, keep them going to the point that they need to be. And Raheem Sterling's post came along, Black Lives Matter comes along, and then suddenly people are contacting me, and I'm getting emails from people that I was emailing lots, and they were never getting back to me. And I was not being bitter about that. I was just fine. We're where we need to be. Maybe 5, 6, 7 years later, but we're here. So the tough times have been particularly tough. I've had the personal support of my wife along the way, um, which I couldn't have done it without. I've had the support of my community. We've worked collaboratively, and I've been in a real privileged position where commercially I've been able to fund things myself and be able to say, if you don't want to do it, fine, but I'm going to go in my own pocket and I'm going to do this because I believe in it.
I'm curious, where did you and your wife meet? Because to be building something similar around the same time, I was like, what? Like that's unheard of.
I mean, it's funny because we're in similar kind of friendship circles is the kind of easiest way to describe it. So we're in similar circles in our kind of early 20s. We grew up in a similar area as teenagers, funny enough. So we first met when we were 14, although we weren't kind of friends altogether at that point. But later on, we kind of got together in our kind of mid 20s. Both had kind of real strong convictions to make change in our industry because she's a sports journalist as well by profession, and yeah, we just both kind of. I hope I supported her, but she certainly supported me. So I think we both supported each other, and that was a really important part of the journey. And this sense of, it's getting done. It's getting done. Like, it's going to get done with them or without them, but it's getting done.
It's
I
gonna
think
do it
that
regardless. I love
energy
it.
that we both sustained in each other.
You've been quite successful in both your consultancy work and in filmmaking. Of those two areas, which one do you enjoy the most? I'm curious.
Oh, geez, I get asked this a lot, and I don't really have an answer because like the life of a filmmaker, like the films that I've made and been involved in, I've walked out of 3 or 4 times. People don't know that, but I've just got frustrated because this is not being done, and then you kind of like, that's it, I'm done with this. I can't deal with this. I've got an executive who's not kind of understanding what I'm trying to say or do, and this kind of real emotion within me kind of like musters up. I don't know if it's my roots, Kind of I've got Jamaican and Irish roots, so I guess the stereotype would tell you that the blood levels go high quickly. So I've kind of erupt and kind of want to walk out, but it's because I care so much, about things like that, and you want I want every detail to be right, and I think um, that's but being out in Jamaica and filming the Jamaica that you want to project to the world is a blessing.
Yeah.
Like working with Stephen Lyle on the Usain Bolt film that we did with Michael Johnson. We sat down and he said, "Well, what kind of film do you want to make?" And I was like, "I don't want a shot of a single beach on Jamaica in this film, because when I go back to Jamaica all the time, yes, we've got beautiful beaches. Yes, that's the thing that I want to show that I'm proud the world sees. But actually, the Jamaica that I enjoy and I love and I connect with is the hills and the mountains, and the families, the food, and I want them to smell it. I want them to feel the people. I want people to be speaking patois without loads of subtitles all over it. I want to be challenging. I want people to experience the Jamaica that I love and know, that I don't feel from television, because I feel white filmmakers at that time are going out there and going straight to the beach because that's the thing they connect with. It's like my lens is different. I want to go to the hills, and and Stephen is of Jamaican heritage as well. So we just had the coolest conversation about this. Go out and make this kind of beautiful thing come to life, and that's why you feel so passionate about it. But it is very much like, big highs and big lows, but eventually you get to the right place with your film. And going through that process, seeing it go out on national television, BBC 123, for the first documentary I made, which is the only sports documentary that's been on BBC 1, 2, and 3 that I'm aware of. That high is just crazy. But then there's equally working with your clients and helping them achieve, helping them grow, and seeing the impact they make, and seeing the impact it has on them as a person, and completing a big deal after months and months of negotiations and trying to get the deliverables right. And like I buzz off all of it, and I love the diversity of the work that I'm doing, that I get to be involved in all those different areas. So it's almost impossible to say which one I enjoy more, because they're such different experiences, but they give me so much at the same time. And I really love the diversity that I've had so far in my career. It's special. A lot of people don't get to have that, because even though they might be earning big money, they're turning up to do one job, right? Or some people aren't fortunate enough to be on big wages, and they're turning up to do one job for the day. And there'll be weeks and months where they don't love that one thing that they do. There'll be weeks and months where they do love that one thing that they do. But for me, I've kind of got this opportunity to work across so many different areas, that my brain's always being stimulated with different challenges and different things, different problems. And I tell the guys in my team, like, when we've got problems that we've got to solve, I'm like, well, why else are we involved? If it was just a matter of everything kind of being easy and not having challenges, then we wouldn't be involved, frankly. So actually, problem is something that you've got to be kind of up for. And I think that's kind of the thing that runs across all of those different areas of work that I look at. What's the thing to solve? What's the thing that we can do new? What's the thing that's going to make an impact? That excites me. That really, really excites me. So sorry, I've dodged your question slightly, but
Nah, it's, to be honest, I didn't expect you to say one or the other one, because I can see when someone is, like I said, we're multifaceted. And it's for you, I think it sounds very much around you're just nurturing you're feeding your curiosity in different areas, and they are all different parts of your identity. You're not one thing. So it's not a surprise that you love doing both.
I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, I just feel very, very fortunate, if I'm being totally honest, because someone upstairs, regardless of the religion you might believe in or not believe in, there's somebody, I think, looking over all of us, and I've, got an energy from something above that is really looking after.
What's your views on racism in football now? From when you started out at kick out to or kick it out to now, and obviously, like I said, you've had Black Lives Matter, you've had Raheem Sterling, you've had different things happen in the last couple of years. What's your views now around the progress, or if there is progress from your perspective on it?
Well, I mean, I think when I started out working in this area in like 2001, we were still talking about racism and problems from the terraces.
Hmm.
Not so much in England in the kind of mass mainstream way, so not like monkey chants, etc. But still, I'd go to football and I'd still hear abuse in pockets. Now I don't hear that so much in those pockets, and it might be because I'm going to mainly Premier League games and I'm not going to games lower down the pyramid. So I don't want to push forward a view that we've kind of tackled it. I think we suppressed a lot of racism in the stands. And what I mean by that is, are racist people still coming to football? Yes, absolutely. Do they withhold their views and not articulate them within the stands because they know that they will be rejected by fellow fans or they will get in trouble with the police or the clubs? Yes. So is that addressing racism in football? Well, it's addressing people articulating it, but it's not addressing what they do outside of a football stadium, whether that's not giving jobs to Black and Asian people, or having relationships where they're discriminatory to people in the street, in the workplace, etc., etc. So I think we need to be careful with what we're suggesting is or celebrating what is progress. First of all, for me, the work that I've been involved in has always been around, well, why have we got this situation where we have so many black athletes, but we have so few black managers? We have few black people working in lots of different areas of the game. Um, isn't that racism? Isn't that this kind of covert racism, as we used back in the day, was the kind of the terminology we would use, overt and covert racism? Why have we got such underrepresentation in the game? Um, I think that's where we still have huge challenges and problems. And when I talk about the game as well, I must kind of say I'm talking from the lens of the the male game, because in the women's
Yeah.
game we still have huge underrepresentation of black females. So it's important to acknowledge that within a conversation like this. Um, so how do we change the makeup of you know the leadership teams, the boards of professional football clubs? Or are we saying that we're kind of okay with the situation as it is because we've got some wealthy black footballers and we have more black people coming to football games than we did previously, and we celebrate black culture, whatever that is, or whatever that turns up as, through the kind of content that we see around football at the moment, certainly through the digital space. For me, my kind of focus is um, what do we, you know, where do we see representation and who manages the power and the money in football? So if I'm saying 42% of Premier League players are black and we've only got one boardroom member across 20 clubs, then actually what we're saying is we're contributing more than £1 billion as a black community to the football industry, and that's a baseline kind of, the figure's much higher than that when you look at commercial, etc. Um, and we've got one person. Um,
It's crazy.
it's crazy. And look, at the FA, we've got a black board member who is a former player in Joby McAnuff. So that is a significant step forward in terms of having representation in that space. And that's because we've got some intentional leaders who are looking at we need to address these things and doing things to make football better and to making their organisations more relevant. But we need to see more of that. We need to see more Brentfords. We need to see more leadership like they do in areas at the FA. We need to push this forward. Otherwise, we'll just find ourselves in 10 years' time talking about, it's really bad that we've got one black board member. We can't have that conversation then. And when people say to me, yeah, but Leon, if you look down at the football industry, there's not that many senior black people. I'm like, well, if you're looking for a white person to join your board, also a white person, if you're looking for anybody to join your board, which is like 99% of the time a white person who's put there, do you just look at who is within football? Because actually, the people I see being appointed onto football boards, etc., are from business, they're from the
Yeah.
city, they're top lawyers, etc. So why aren't you looking there for black people? And by the way, like when you're doing kind of like recruitment, let's say, how we improve the lead. When you're recruiting for the next leaders in any industry, many people will go to Oxford, Cambridge, Durham, Bristol, etc., Redbrick universities. Well, how many times have you put initiatives like that together in football, where you're kind of looking for black people coming from Oxford, Cambridge, etc., etc.? And that's not me necessarily saying those are the best people, but that would be a very obvious first step if you were looking to find the next black leaders to come into the football industry. But no one's ever thought of that. In fact, one very senior leader told me when I suggested something along those lines, well, that would be cheating. I was like, cheating? What's that word? How is that? How is that cheating? Because
Man,
for
the
me,
ignorance.
well, I don't expect everyone to agree with that. I don't expect everyone to agree with that way forward as a strategy, by the way. But it would be a very easy strategy to follow because you're saying the brightest people in the country for you come from those institutions because that's your kind of that's who you're employing. So why don't you look at the black people there, go into the second year, find the football people who have people have an interest in football, target them, and say we're going to get you on a kind of a pathway to be running our clubs, etc., etc. But that's not happening, and I think that comes down to at the moment having lots of people who just do not see black people in any other way apart from athletes and entertainers.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds cold and it sounds direct, but sadly, that's how I see it. And if you even have a deeper dive into that in football, if you look at where the money is spent around the black community or communities, it's spent on identifying black athletes. So football clubs will spend money looking at where black athletes can come and become athletes within their football clubs. And also, it's spent on, how can we stop black communities getting into knife crime? And getting into trouble in inner cities. So actually, when you break that down, that's quite deep. It's saying, as organisations, you're prepared to spend money on black people as athletes. You're prepared to spend money on black people as people who potentially find themselves in problems of knife crime, etc., etc. Things we see on the news constantly. How much money do you spend on developing black leaders, given that you have such a challenge? Zero. So what does that tell us about your relationship with these communities? It tells you how you see us. And that, for me, I think is, you know, powerful and where we need to take a step back and where the conversations need to be with many in the football industry. And it's a difficult conversation because it can feel very personal. But unless we have those kind of conversations, um, I do fear that we're not really going to move forward in the way that we need to.
Speaking of leadership, or leaders, how do you define leadership?
I mean, I think leadership is something that you are given or earn or take, and it's a responsibility. Ultimately, it's anchored in a responsibility um, to develop, move, and make things happen. For me, I look at the people who have leadership positions at the moment within football to develop the game positively, be that financially, be that the long term interests of the game, be that the impact that is had by a football club or football institution, be that whatever your space that you're leading in, it's like you're assessed by impact. So, what impact can you drive as a leader? And that does not mean you do things all yourself. It means, as a leader, I think the leaders that impress me are the leaders who go, I'm not good at this particular thing. Because I think there's an expectation um, in the old world that leaders are meant to be good at absolutely everything. Um, but I think the leaders that impress me are the leaders that go, do you know what? I have not got the lived experience of a black man or woman in the UK, but I know this is an important part of the work I'm doing in the industry I'm in and the business I'm working within. So I need to go and find this expertise to have within my organization to help guide me and lead me to make the best decisions as the person who has ultimate responsibility and accountability. Um, and I don't think that happens anywhere near enough. I think people basically go, my experience of the world is this. I don't fully understand this, but my personal view is this isn't as important. So therefore, this won't get as much attention as all of this other stuff. And as a result, it's just left there. And as a result, I don't understand why this will enhance my business. So I don't believe in it. So I'm not going to invest in it. Whereas I think the good leaders go, you know what? I understand the business I'm in. I understand where my capabilities are. I understand where my strengths are, and I'm going to make sure the areas where I don't have those strengths or experience, I'm going to get some serious expertise, and I'm going to pay for it because I would pay for it in other areas.
That's the key.
I'm going to pay for it because let me tell you this: if someone does not have any expertise in the digital space of a business, they're not going to go to their friend who is good at digital stuff and just ask them for a beer every now and then to help explain some stuff so they can kind of understand it and go back to their business. They're going to pay significant money to make sure that they have the expertise, understanding to make the right decision. When it comes to diversity, it's kind of like a charity box that sits at the end of a desk that people shake every October to say, right, we're doing this month, I want everyone to get heavily involved, and it doesn't sit as within, the important KPIs within the business or and I'm sorry, I've kind of extended out from your what is a leader, but I'm just
Nah, it works. Like, it makes perfect sense.
trying to trying to nail my experience of good leadership and bad leadership, and where people don't see it in themselves, and that has to change. That has to change, and I think that comes from that's got to come from leadership to make accelerated change. And that's not to, I mean, look, I've talked about BCOMS and me not feeling there was leadership there, so I had to become a leader. It was like not a, it was not a choice. Um, well, it was a choice, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. It just had to be done if I wanted to see any progress, because otherwise I'd be waiting for everyone else to wake up and
Yeah.
it can't be done.
Nothing ever gets done. Yeah. And I guess my last question to you then be, what's next for you?
Yeah. Do you know what? I mean, the the criticism that I've had, um, or I perceive as criticism, is that I'm doing too much. Speaking really kind of open. I'm doing too much. I'm spread too thin. I'm trying to do a million things. I'm trying to change the world. Trying to do all these different things, and I need to focus on specific areas and build those areas. And I've been told that for the last 15 years, frankly. And maybe those people are right, but I've found some way of growing things sufficiently so that they are now able to stand on their 2 feet without me. And that's the kind of key thing. If, hopefully this doesn't happen, but if I was to drop dead tomorrow, I'd like to think that BCOMS would continue and would continue to make an impact. I'd like to think the Football Blacklist will continue to grow and make an impact. So, in many ways, the kind of work that I put into those things will help them to continue to stand alone from this point forward, which I'm really, really, happy and pleased about. But I think, it's I I'm really interested in scaling up and having a bigger impact and working internationally, not just in this country, to understand challenges elsewhere. But I've got to also understand, am I the right person for that? Um, or is the role empowering other people who might not have the connections and doors to push open that I have now at this time in my life? What's going to make the impact? Do I always need to be involved? Maybe it's an introduction for somebody else to move things forward. That's the big play as part of all of this. But for me, I just want to keep enjoying what I'm doing. Um, I'm really looking forward to the challenges that I'll continue to have around all areas of the business that I'm working on. But also probably want to get to a space relatively soon where maybe I'm not working 5 days a week, maybe I'm doing four and seeing more of my children. I don't think leaders say those things out loud. Men don't say those things out loud. But I think it's a powerful thing. Um, can you make an impact in 4 days a week as opposed to five, and make a bigger impact in your family? Those are things I've been reflecting on recently. It's not in my DNA to do that, so it's a really difficult thought for me to have. How can I not work 5 days a week and be on my knees come Friday afternoon? It's just what I've been used to for like the last 20 years of my life. But actually, when you break it down, you think about what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think I'm going to be on my deathbed saying I wish I worked more. Put it that way. I don't think I'm going to be on my deathbed saying, "Oh my God, I wish I worked a lot more and I worked more hours." I think I'll be on my deathbed saying, "I wish I spent more time with my family," and that is a humbling thought, and it's a challenging thought for me, a really challenging thought for me. But it's one I'm beginning to embrace at the moment. And look, I'm in a privileged position because money isn't as important as it was 10, 15 years ago to me. Because I said to someone the other day, I didn't expect to be sat in first class. I didn't expect to have people to help me with my diary. I didn't expect to have teams of people working for me. It wasn't part of my trajectory or plan as a young person. I didn't think so. To have it now is the biggest blessing ever. I feel like I won the lottery every time I wake up in the morning and I get to do these things. So, like, so my it's a time of real self-reflection at the moment. I don't know if that's because of COVID and getting back to the real world as it was now, or the new world, but um, for me, it's like assessing what is success and what is happiness. Um, and that's quite a deep thought. And as you can probably tell, I'm halfway through thinking it through. So I'm just being vulnerable and throwing it out there right now.
Which I appreciate. And I'm going to share a thought that kind of comes to mind, which is you've spent a number of years, a lot of years, pouring out into the work that you do and pouring out into others and making a difference for other people, which has been great. You've made a difference for black footballers, black people in sport. You've elevated a lot of people who were previously unheard of and hidden, and it's absolutely amazing. And for me, the next iteration of, or the next chapter, especially when you come to a level like yours, is what does pouring into myself look like to ensure that I am around for those I love, those I care about. I can see their growth, I can see their journey. Because you taking that step back, you can work 4 days a week and you'll be fine because you've got people around you to support you. That's the good leadership part. That's you letting go of certain things. That's you no longer going in that, like you said, that Jamaican Irish combination of just going for everything. That's you actually intentionally changing things. But it also shows what's important, and it's another level of representation that we don't get to see of. Because even generally speaking, we get to see a lot of great people doing great things. And then either their personal lives change, not the greatest. And it'd be great to actually see a model where actually there's different iterations in their journey, in their chapters. And it sounds like you're about to step into what that next one looks like for you, which is going to be hard to slow down, because when I work with senior leaders, it's always hard for them to slow down. But when they do it, not one of my clients have ever regretted it. They've absolutely loved it. They're like, why didn't I do this sooner? So, and it's not slowing down to not doing anything. It's just slowing down to a different pace and doing something different to just being in the business and doing all those different challenges. So it's still hard, but it's so much more effective, and they feel so much more joy and at peace in the lives that they have.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's scary listening to it back because of where I am right now. it's really scary, the thought of, oh, I need to work and I need to be across absolutely everything. But actually, I think I've got enough self awareness now to know that you know what's important, and, and how do you make that jump. So I don't know. Be interesting. Maybe in a year's time we'll have another chat. Continuing to work 7 days a week and not get my phone and all of that. But the intention right here and now is there's got to be a better way, and that's not complaining about the life I have right now. That's all. It's just I'm in a real privileged place, but I need to give a better version of myself to everybody, and that involves making some changes. So yeah, I'm challenging myself. Let's see.
I love it. And I appreciate this conversation. Appreciate you sharing your journey. Appreciate you being open and vulnerable. And honestly, inspired by the work that you do and what you've been creating and you kind of brought to life. And obviously, I'm going to show in the show notes all the different things that you do so people can tap in more and more into the world of Leo Mann and Refresh Sports. And if people have not seen the film as well, I think it's still actually available on iPlayer. I know it was a while ago. I'm not sure it still is, but if they haven't, they should tap into it because it was a brilliant documentary that you did as well with Usain Bolt.
Thanks, my man. Appreciate it.
All right. This is Everyday Leadership. Speak to you next week.